Hello, glad to see you on the channel. Subscribe, give a like, and don't forget to leave a comment. Enjoy watching.
You're not being fired, Eric. It's more of a pivot. That's what Carl said, looking me right in the face, his hands folded neatly over a manila folder that probably had a printout of my LinkedIn profile already marked archived. His voice had that oily, HR-polished tone that always meant something bad was about to happen, but they were going to try and make it sound like a massage and a promotion. I sat there, nodding, smiling a little, wondering if I'd left the damn coffee machine on at home. Because really, once you've hit 50 and you've been around this industry long enough, you start recognizing moments like this for what they really are, endings dressed up like beginnings. Carl leaned in, like we were old friends at a bar, not a boss and a guy he was about to screw over. This isn't personal. It's about efficiency, streamlining, adapting to the new agile workflows. He said all the buzzwords like he actually believed them, like his MBA had been issued by a TED Talk. My eye twitched, just once, but I didn't blink, didn't ask questions, just nodded again. That's what they expect guys like me to do, mid-50s, a little gray at the temples, not flashy, not loud, just quietly fading away like smoke from an extinguished candle. Behind Carl, through the half-open blinds of his glass office, I could see Ryan walking past, already carrying a project binder that used to live on my desk. He didn't look in, didn't need to. He knew. I trained Ryan. Helped onboard him when he was fresh out of grad school and couldn't tell a Gantt chart from a PowerPoint slide. He was nice enough at first, eager, maybe a little too eager, but I saw potential. So I gave him my time, my methods, my shortcuts, my patience, my goddamn weekends. And now, here we were. I was being streamlined, and Ryan was sliding into my chair like it had always belonged to him. Carl cleared his throat. We'll, of course, offer a generous transition package. 6 months severance, outplacement support, and, if you want, a reference letter. You've done good work here, Eric. Really good work. He said it like he was writing my eulogy, and I almost laughed. Almost. But instead, I just closed my laptop softly. No theatrics. No speeches. Just the sound of plastic meeting plastic. One final click. And then I waited for the inevitable email. You know the one. The Dear Team, we're excited to announce a new leadership structure email. The one where my name disappears between the lines like a magician's trick. Where Ryan gets promoted and the words fresh perspective get thrown around like confetti at a party I wasn't invited to. Be honest. Have you ever watched someone steal your job with a smile? What would you have done in Eric's shoes? Sat there, quiet as they talked about agility and culture fit, like you weren't even in the room? That night, I went home and told my wife, Maggie, that I was restructured. She didn't say anything right away, just poured me a scotch and sat down across from me. She'd seen it coming. Maybe not this exact moment, but the general shape of it. The nights I came home later and later, muttering about Carl's shifting priorities and Ryan's sudden authority in meetings he hadn't earned. She's sharp like that. Always has been. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was panicking, but because I couldn't stop replaying the little things. Ryan asking to sit in on my client calls. Carl inviting him to leadership luncheons without me. The sudden silence around certain projects I'd owned for years. It was a slow ghosting, like being erased in pencil before they moved on to ink. The next morning, I opened my inbox and, sure enough, there it was. Subject, Organizational Update Body. Dear Team, as we continue to evolve and innovate, we are pleased to welcome Ryan McDonnell into a newly expanded leadership role as Director of Project Operations. Ryan brings a fresh vision and strategic agility to the position, and we are confident in his ability to guide us through this exciting new chapter. We thank Eric Lawson for his many years of service and wish him the best in his future endeavors. I stared at the word fresh for a while, like I was a gallon of milk that had just gone bad. No mention of my 16 years. No note about the systems I'd built from scratch, or the contracts I'd salvaged when the company was bleeding out in '09. Just a polite burial under corporate jargon. So, I did what any old-school guy with a little pride and a lot of free time does. I printed that email out and pinned it to the wall above my desk at home. A trophy, in a way. Not for what they did, but for how quietly I took it. Because here's the thing they didn't count on. I may be old school, but I never forget where the bodies are buried. Ryan had inherited the crown, but he didn't know the kingdom the way I did. And Carl? Carl thought I'd just ride off into the sunset, grateful for the scraps. But I was already thinking about something else. Something slower, smarter. No fireworks. No lawsuits. Just a few carefully timed truths. After all, if you're going to replace the guy who built the engine, you'd better hope the new kid knows where the gears are. And from where I was sitting, it didn't look like he had a clue. A year earlier, I still believed I was indispensable. Maybe not flashy, maybe not loud, but solid, reliable, and frankly, too damn important to be replaced by a kid who still wore sneakers to client meetings and thought Slack was a substitute for actual communication. Ryan McDonnell came in with that fresh out of grad school gleam in his eye, armed with buzzwords, a sharp haircut, and exactly zero real-world experience. But hey, I remembered being young once. I remembered what it felt like to walk into a room and have no idea how things actually worked, but pretend like I did anyway. So, I did what no one had done for me. I took the kid under my wing. The first time I showed Ryan our back-end systems, he blinked at the screen like I'd handed him a spaceship dashboard. I asked him to reformat a simple spreadsheet, client timelines, budget allocations, the kind of thing an intern should be able to handle before lunch, and he managed to delete 2 columns, screw up the color coding, and somehow erase the drop-downs I'd spent 20 minutes customizing. I didn't say a word, just took a deep breath, fixed it, and told him we'd walk through it again tomorrow. That's who I was, still am, honestly. I believed in mentorship. I believed in building people up and giving them the tools they need to succeed instead of watching them drown. I told myself, if I can train this kid right, he could be an asset to the team, maybe even take over one day, when I was ready. But I wasn't ready. Not even close. And what I didn't realize at the time was that Ryan wasn't there to learn the ropes, he was there to climb them. At first, it was small things. He'd echo something I'd said in a meeting, but louder and with a bit more confidence, and suddenly Carl was nodding like it was pure gold. Or he'd stay late, not to actually work, but to be seen staying late, which is a very different thing. He figured out early that Carl liked visibility more than results. Show up early, leave late, smile big, and you were halfway to being his favorite. I remember this one meeting. We were reviewing Q2 client satisfaction metrics, and Ryan spoke up about a retention strategy we'd implemented 2 months earlier. Only, he pitched it like it was brand new. Like it was his idea. Word for word what I'd written in my planning doc. And Carl lit up like he'd just witnessed a TED Talk live. I looked at Ryan, just for a second, and he gave me this little shrug, like, you snooze, you lose. That was the first time I felt the chill. The moment I realized this wasn't just a naive kid parroting things, this was a move. A calculated, polished, ambition-soaked move. Maggie, my wife, she saw it coming before I did. One night over dinner, she put down her fork and said, he's gunning for your spot, Eric. You know that, right? I laughed, maybe too quickly, and said, come on, he's just young. He doesn't even know how the whole operation fits together yet. She gave me that look, eyebrows slightly raised, lips pressed just tight enough to signal she was dead serious. That's exactly why he needs you now, and exactly why he won't later. Still, I brushed it off. I told myself I was helping the next generation, doing my part to leave things better than I found them. And honestly, I didn't mind showing someone the ropes until he started cutting them behind my back. There was a company dinner about 6 months in, one of those forced fun events with soggy crab cakes and awkward toasts. Carl stood up, made some over-rehearsed speech about innovation and resilience, then invited one of our rising stars to say a few words. Ryan walked up like he was accepting an Oscar. He gave this 5-minute spiel about agility in uncertain markets and pivot strategies. But here's the kicker, it was my quarterly strategy deck. The same damn slides I'd emailed him to review a week earlier. He changed 2 titles, slapped his name on it, and now he was presenting it to the whole company while Carl clapped like a trained seal. I locked eyes with Ryan from across the room. He didn't flinch. Just kept talking, smiling, basking in the applause. That was the night I stopped seeing him as a kid. He wasn't green anymore. He was groomed. And Carl? He was already circling the wagons, setting the stage for whatever transition they'd started planning the minute I showed Ryan where the damn server logs were stored. The weirdest part is, I still wanted to believe the best. I told myself maybe it was just a miscommunication. Maybe I hadn't been clear. Maybe I'd given him too much freedom and not enough context. But deep down, I knew what was happening. I'd handed him the keys and he'd already started changing the locks. At home, Maggie started pushing again. You need to speak up, she said. Don't let them erase you. But I was tired. I'd spent years building that place up from nothing back when the office still had folding tables and the budget barely covered coffee. I didn't want to be the bitter old guy yelling about how things used to be. I wanted to be the mentor, the builder, the steady hand. But even a steady hand gets slapped away when people decide you're in the way. So I kept showing up, kept fixing Ryan's mistakes before anyone saw them, kept writing the reports he took credit for, kept smiling through meetings while Carl started sending calendar invites that didn't include me. I told myself I was holding the line. What I didn't realize then was that the line had already been moved. I just hadn't noticed I was on the wrong side of it. Carl Bennett had one of those smiles that people mistake for warmth when it's really just well-practiced insulation. Safe, shallow, corporate to the core. Like a politician who's memorized your kids' names for small talk but couldn't pick them out of a lineup if his bonus depended on it. When I first started under Carl, back when the company still fit into one floor of a rented office downtown, I thought he was harmless, one of those mid-level types who knew how to stay just close enough to power without ever getting singed by responsibility. But over the years, I watched him climb, not fast, but steady, like mold on drywall, quiet, inevitable, and somehow always your fault for not catching it sooner. The first time he pulled the compliment as dagger move, I almost missed it. We were doing my annual review. This was maybe 8 months before the firing, and he leaned back in his chair, steepled his fingers like a TED speaker, and said, "Eric, your institutional knowledge is irreplaceable." That said, we've really been pivoting toward a culture of agility and creative disruption. I nodded like I understood what that meant. But let's be honest, agility in corporate speak just means you're about to be replaced by someone younger and cheaper, and creative disruption means someone read half a blog post on leadership and now thinks chaos is a business strategy. That review was the start of the phasing out, though it came with all the usual corporate camouflage. Tasks started disappearing from my plate, but nobody said why. I'd open the project dashboard and see that Ryan had been added to initiatives I used to run solo. No explanation, no conversation, just a silent reshuffling that told me everything I needed to know. My name was still on the org chart, but my fingerprints were being wiped off the glass. Then came the calendar games. You know the kind. Weekly syncs that didn't show up for me, only for me to hear about them secondhand from a colleague awkwardly mentioning the meeting you weren't at. Carl always blamed Outlook. "Weird," he'd say, tapping at his phone like he gave a damn. "Let me look into that." He never did. It was death by omission, slow, quiet, deniable. And every time he spoke to me, it was through a filter of faux concern and motivational garbage. "We want you to focus on where you add the most value. There's a lot of upside in mentorship roles right now. Your leadership legacy matters more than ever." Translation? Keep training, Ryan. Keep fading out. Don't make waves. By then, even Maggie was done sugarcoating. One night, after another long day of pretending not to notice I was being erased, she put her wine glass down a little too hard and said, "Are you going to just let them do this to you? Or are you going to remind them who built that damn system in the first place?" She was right, of course. She always is. But I wasn't ready. Not yet. Instead, I started keeping records. Quietly. Deliberately. Every assignment change. Every email thread where Ryan took credit for my work. Every meeting I was left out of. I archived it all. Made local backups. Logged timelines. Dates. Approvals. Not because I wanted to sue them. Not because I had some master plan. But because I knew that when the floor dropped out, I'd want to have more than just bruises to show for it. It wasn't paranoia. It was insurance. And then came the moment I found it. The old system vulnerability. Something I'd built years ago, back when our internal tool set was still a Frankenstein of open-source components and late-night patch jobs. I created a maintenance backdoor, a diagnostic panel, really, so I could fix live bugs without exposing admin controls to the dev team. It was supposed to be temporary. But like everything in that place, temporary became permanent the moment it worked. Nobody else knew it existed. Not even Carl. I stared at the dusty old script for a while, heart beating a little faster than I'd admit. It still worked. Still opened. Still showed me logs. User behavior. Access patterns. File histories. Nothing malicious, nothing dangerous, but a view into things that most people assumed were invisible. It felt like holding a key to a door nobody remembered was there. I didn't touch it again, not for months. I just bookmarked it, encrypted it, and left it alone. But that night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Because now I wasn't just watching the house burn. I had the blueprints. I had the matches. And I knew exactly where the gas line ran. Carl's mistake wasn't underestimating me. No, Carl's real mistake was thinking he could smile through my funeral while standing on a foundation I'd poured with my own 2 hands. He'd forgotten that old builders don't just walk away. They remember every crack, every patch, every loose tile. And when it starts to fall apart, they're the only ones who know exactly where it's going to break. There's a strange kind of satisfaction in silence, especially when you know the house is about to collapse, and you're the only one who remembers where the cracks are hidden. After Carl gave me the polite boot and Ryan settled into my old office with his sleeves rolled and his confidence bloated, I disappeared from the company calendar without a single ripple, just like they wanted. But I didn't vanish. No, I watched. Not obsessively, not out of bitterness, but with the calm precision of someone who knew exactly what would happen next and had all the time in the world to enjoy the show. The first sign of trouble came 3 weeks after I left, when I got a call from one of my old clients, one of the long-timers. The big accounts that paid our rent back when Carl was still sweating over retention numbers and pretending his dog was barking on Zoom calls to end meetings early. The client sounded frustrated, confused, asking me casually, politely, if I happened to know what happened to the file access protocols I'd implemented last quarter. Apparently, Ryan had updated them and promptly locked out half the team, which stalled a project mid-flight and delayed delivery by 10 business days. I didn't say much, just apologized for the inconvenience, said I was no longer with the company, and hung up before my grin stretched too wide to hide. Because that was the thing Ryan never understood. Tech isn't about flair or buzzwords, or whatever half-baked philosophy he picked up from a LinkedIn influencer with perfect teeth and zero field experience. It's about knowing where the levers are, what happens when you pull them, and why they were installed in the first place. I kept getting those calls. Little echoes of chaos drifting into my day like smoke through a cracked window. And I didn't have to lift a finger. Ryan was already in over his head, juggling processes he barely understood and deadlines he couldn't meet. Carl, predictably, started circling the wagons, trying to protect his golden boy while simultaneously nudging him toward the edge of the cliff. It was textbook office politics, build them up fast so they can take the fall even faster. But I wasn't just listening. I'd been patient, deliberate, and, frankly, a little vengeful. The day after my severance cleared and my NDA turned out to be conveniently nonspecific, I opened that old backdoor I'd found, my forgotten panel, still humming quietly in the background of their infrastructure like a whisper in a crowded room. And what I saw confirmed what I already suspected. Files left unsecured. Client data mismanaged. Timeline documents quietly edited after deadlines had passed. Internal messages filled with spin and excuse, with Carl framing each disaster like it was a learning opportunity instead of the mess he'd allowed to fester. So I compiled one file, just one, clean, factual, timestamped. A document showing a failed rollout, blamed on legacy code, that was actually the result of Ryan's unauthorized changes. I didn't include any commentary. No accusations. Just the facts. Then I sent it, anonymously, to a client contact I trusted, someone I'd worked with for years, someone who still believed I was the guy who got things done. It took about 72 hours for the fallout to start. Then I sent another document, this time to an investor contact, a spreadsheet showing internal delays that had been concealed through redated milestones and padded estimates. Nothing illegal, maybe, but shady enough to raise eyebrows and spark a call or two. Then came the email to HR, politely highlighting a series of performance reviews that bore obvious signs of manipulation. Phrases copy-pasted across years, identical wording used to frame me as resistant to change, without any supporting incidents or documentation. I didn't sign it. Didn't have to. Because once the questions started, the answers wrote themselves. From the sidelines, I watched Ryan flail, caught between an image he couldn't live up to and a system he couldn't manage. Carl, of course, did what Carl always did. Found someone else to blame. I heard, through the grapevine, that Carl started showing up early, making surprise walkarounds, pretending to be the concerned leader when in reality he was just trying to see how far the rot had spread before someone tied his name to it. The moment that sealed it wasn't an email or a document, it was a phone call. An investor, older guy, sharp, no time for fluff, asked if I could drop by the office for a chat. Just informal. Just perspective. He said they wanted to understand the full picture of recent events, which was rich coming from a board member who hadn't spoken to me in 5 years. But I said sure. Why not? And so, 2 months after being streamlined, I walked back through those sliding glass doors, not as an employee, not as a team lead, not as someone begging for reinstatement. Just a man with time, history, and a perfect memory for how the foundation was poured. The lobby receptionist blinked when she saw me, like a ghost had stepped off the elevator. But I didn't even need a badge. They were expecting me. The investor met me with a handshake and a smile, asked if I wanted coffee. I declined. As we walked toward the conference room, Carl stepped out of his office and froze. Just for a second, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, like he'd seen something he thought was buried 6 feet under suddenly sit up and stretch. I didn't say a word, just met his stare and gave him the faintest nod, the kind of gesture that says, "You remember what you did, and now so does everyone else." The investor ushered me into the room, thanked me for coming, said they appreciated my candor. I smiled, leaned back in the chair, and said, "No problem." I figured it was only a matter of time. Because that's the thing about being pushed out. If you do it to the wrong person, the kind who remembers where all the wiring runs and which screws were never tightened, you'd better pray they really do disappear. I didn't need revenge. I just needed the truth to breathe for a minute. And from the look on Carl's face, it had already started to suffocate him. There's a certain look a man gets when he realizes he's not holding the leash anymore, and Carl Bennett wore that look like a poorly ironed suit the moment I stepped into that conference room, coffee in hand and not a care in my voice. He tried to recover, of course, tried to paste on that same corporate smile he'd used the day he told me I was valuable but outdated, but this time it didn't land the way it used to. His eyes betrayed him. They darted, flicked, searching for someone else to blame, someone else to stand between him and the reckoning he never thought would come from a guy who quietly packed his things and left without so much as a slammed door. The room was already tense, like a rubber band stretched to its final inch. You could practically smell the burned trust hanging in the air, the scent of something expensive slowly unraveling. One of the board members, a woman I'd only met twice during my tenure, both times she nodded like she barely remembered me, was sitting at the end of the table, flipping through printed emails I hadn't sent, but had damn well ensured found their way to the right inboxes. She looked up, nodded again, but this time with recognition, maybe even a hint of apology, the kind people give when they realize you weren't just part of the wallpaper after all. Carl started with pleasantries, naturally. "Eric, good to see you. Thanks for coming in on short notice." He gestured to the seat across from him, already trying to guide the tone like he still had command. I took the seat slowly, no rush, placing my coffee down like I had all day to enjoy it. And I did. I wasn't here for vengeance. I was here to watch. He launched into a rambling explanation, the kind that sounds rehearsed but was clearly crumbling under pressure. Obviously, we've had a few bumps in the road since the transition. Ryan's no longer with us. That part actually made me chuckle, and not quietly. He didn't appreciate the laugh, but I didn't care. I let it hang there between us, a reminder that I wasn't the one sweating through a dress shirt while trying to put out 5 fires with a single glass of PR-approved water. They wanted my insight. That was the official line. A debrief. An informal chat. Unofficially, they wanted to know if I was the one who tipped the balance, who pulled the thread that sent their carefully tailored narrative spinning into chaos. And I didn't lie. I told them what I saw before I left. I told them what I had warned Carl about in 2 separate memos, neither of which got responses, by the way. I told them about the systems Ryan didn't understand, the clients who called me directly out of desperation, the culture of yes-men that had bloomed under Carl's fragile ego like mildew on wet carpet. Carl kept interjecting with phrases like unfortunate timing and learning opportunity, but no one was buying it anymore. His confidence had a crack now, a visible fracture running straight through the center, and the more he talked, the deeper it went. At one point, when he said something about overcommunication being a potential contributor, I saw one of the board members close their notepad and lean back like they'd already made up their mind. And I didn't gloat. Not really. I just sat there, sipped my coffee, and let him twist in the very wind he'd spent months building. That's the thing about guys like Carl. They think because you don't bark, you don't bite. But some dogs don't need to bite. They just sit and wait while the house burns down exactly how they said it would. When it was over, I stood up calmly. No speeches. No revenge monologues. Just one look at Carl, steady, measured, like a man looking at a tombstone that hadn't been carved yet. And I said the only thing I needed to. "You should have let the old dog retire, Carl. Now look at the mess." He didn't respond. Couldn't. Maybe part of him wanted to lash out, throw one last jab, blame me for the fire, but he knew. Hell, They all knew. I hadn't started the fire. I just stopped trying to put it out. I walked out without a badge, without a title, without even a forwarding email address. Just me and my silence and the knowledge that I had left a mark, whether they wanted to admit it or not. On the way out, the receptionist, new girl, probably hadn't even learned my name before I got cut, gave me a nod. One of those, I heard what happened kinds of nods. I gave her a small smile, just enough to say, "Don't worry, it's all just a game." Outside, the sun was out. The city was loud. Life had moved on. I wasn't going back to that office. I didn't want to. And yet I wasn't bitter, not exactly. Not angry either. Just free. I had no job, no lawsuit, no carefully worded LinkedIn post with bullet points about resilience and gratitude. Just a clean conscience and maybe, just maybe, a message sitting in my inbox from a company that saw how I handled this mess and wanted someone who didn't fold when the deck got stacked. Or maybe not. And honestly, maybe that was okay too. Because sometimes you don't burn the bridge. You just wait. Let the termites do their job. Let time expose the rot. Then you watch it collapse from a safe distance with a cup of coffee in hand and the peace of knowing you didn't have to lift a damn finger. Some people want closure. I just wanted truth. So tell me, was I right to take the quiet road? Or should I have burned the whole damn thing down?